You are watching the World 24/7 on the NDTV network. I'm Parmeshwar Bawa. We've got an action-packed bulletin lined up for you. Let's begin with the top stories you need to know. India stands firm on POK. India's stern message to Pakistan on POK says that Pakistan must vacate illegally occupied territory. Israel said it targeted Hamas leader Mohammed Sinwar in a strike on a Gaza hospital as the region's attention was on Donald Trump's arrival in Saudi Arabia. Trump and MBS strike an arms deal. The US and Saudi Arabia have signed a $142 billion arms deal. As the US President Donald Trump said, Washington had no stronger partner than the Gulf nation. Mark Carney, Canada's newly elected Prime Minister, has appointed Anita Anand as the country's foreign minister as part of a cabinet reshuffle highlighting the growing presence and influence of the Indian diaspora in Canadian politics. Tom Cooper, an Austrian combat aviation analyst, in an exclusive interview to NDTV says India's retaliation to Pakistani aggression following Operation Sindoor was a clear-cut victory. In a first, a judge in the US allowed Trump to use the Alien Enemies Act to deport Venezuelans. This as federal judges in at least 3 states have issued orders blocking deportations under the Alien Enemies Act. Well, our big focus is the big deal in the desert. The United States and Saudi Arabia have signed a $142 billion arms deal. As US President Donald Trump said, Washington had no stronger partner than the Gulf nation. The first day of Trump's Middle East trip also saw a flurry of deals for US tech companies announced at the Saudi-US Investment Summit, the biggest of which was NVIDIA, which said that it would sell thousands of AI chips in Saudi Arabia. Now, for years, the US-Saudi Arabia relationship, it's actually revolved around oil and defense. But this week's state visit by Donald Trump to Riyadh strongly signals a pivot to technology. This as the regions find common ground not in petroleum, but in rich wells of investment capital. Trump's visit included an aerial escort by Saudi F-16 planes, as we covered, and a ceremony in the opulent Saudi royal court. And it was attended by the who's who of AI's high priests, including NVIDIA CEO Jensen Huang, OpenAI CEO Sam Altman, Tesla CEO and first buddy Elon Musk, as well as leaders of Amazon, Google, Uber, among others. Trump has scored a symbolic victory at the summit when Riyadh's pledged to invest $1 trillion in the US. But that staggering number will test Trump and Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman's ability to actually match their rhetoric with reality. But just listen in to some of the key highlights.
My fervent hope, wish, and even my dream that Saudi Arabia will soon be joining the Abraham Accords. I think it'll be a tremendous tribute to your country, and it will be something that's really going to be very important for the future of the Middle East. I want to make a deal with Iran. If I can make a deal with Iran, I'll be very happy if we're going to make your region and the world a safer place. But if Iran's leadership rejects this olive branch and continues to attack their neighbors, then we will have no choice but to inflict massive, maximum pressure.
Meanwhile, the US president also said that he would lift all sanctions on Syria to give them a chance at greatness, a major shift in Washington's policy towards Damascus. But Trump's announcement in Saudi Arabia, which he suggested was actually influenced by Istanbul and Riyadh, came a day before he's set to meet with Syrian President Ahmed al-Shara, a former rebel leader who helped topple Bashar al-Assad. Shara has been trying to woo Washington, reportedly telling a Trump ally that he wants a business deal and a Trump tower in Damascus. Meanwhile, Western governments have largely been reluctant to ease restrictions on Damascus before the new leadership meets certain humanitarian as well as political conditions. Listen in.
I will be ordering the cessation of sanctions against Syria in order to give them a chance at greatness. Now it's their time to shine. It's their time to shine. We're taking them all off, and good luck, Syria. Show us something very special like they've done, frankly, in Saudi Arabia. Okay? They're going to show us something special.
And for further clarity, joining us live from California at the moment, Dmitry Zeblin, geopolitical strategist. Thanks so much, Dmitry, for making time for us on NDTV. Let's actually start with the optics versus outcomes. Donald Trump has announced $600 billion in deals with Saudi Arabia, yet the numbers provided by the White House amount to about less than half. So how should this gap be interpreted geopolitically? And is this actually about perception management, or are we looking at a genuine shift in US-Saudi economic cooperation?
Well, that's a great question. I mean, I think with a lot of these commitments and pledges, you can't really take it at face value. I mean, I know Mohammed bin Salman, the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, said the investments can go as high as potentially $1 trillion. However, having said that, we have to see how much that actually is going to materialize. You may have supportive industrial policy, for instance, in the US or any other country for that matter, that doesn't guarantee that the growth necessarily will follow. What is promising from the Trump perspective, though, is you have to look at the domains through which they are cooperating. So one is military. I think they signed a $143 billion military aid package, which the White House claims is the largest military aid package ever signed. I haven't double checked that yet. I'm not sure if that's true. Another area of collaboration we may see is through energy. Energy is a really big one. Obviously, the U.S. has repeatedly talked about energy dominance. Obviously, that has been one of the areas through which Saudi Arabia and the U.S. have cooperated, a sort of arms for oil kind of paradigm. And then thirdly, the other avenue, and we're seeing this certainly reflected in the private markets as well, is increasing U.S. Really Middle Eastern, not just Saudi-specific cooperation when it comes to data centers. And that's really the big one, is artificial intelligence. We may begin to see some export restrictions on some of NVIDIA's most advanced chips, their GPUs, like potentially the A100 and H100, potentially loosened to the extent that those loosened export controls would allow those chips to be exported to Saudi Arabia. And as part of their 2030 vision to diversify their economy away from oil, digitization is central to that strategy. So we may see more collaboration in that respect too, as along the technological front. So it's technological. It's in terms of energy, you may see more collaboration, and militarily. I would say those are the big three conduits because of how all of those actually intersect. They're all frontiers in the modern game of geopolitics around which supply chains are being politicized around.
But Dmitry, as a strategist, when you look at this mix of defense, AI, space, even wildlife conservation deals, is this a coherent long-term alliance strategy or a collection of opportunistic partnerships wrapped in showmanship?
I mean, I wouldn't say so, because you kind of have to follow where the money is going. And when you look at the capital that's being committed, you look at Stargate, which is, I think, being backed by SoftBank and is partnered with OpenAI to set up data centers, and not just the US in terms of setting up AI infrastructure, but also you're seeing that set up in other countries that are aligned with US interests. Now, the US and Saudi Arabia have not always seen eye to eye, obviously. There was a massive falling out between Biden and MBS after he labeled the Crown Prince, or rather, he wanted to make Saudi Arabia a pariah state. And of course, frosty relations there followed. So it's but even under those circumstances, we still saw Washington and Riyadh work hand in hand in a sort of bitter, albeit necessary marriage, you could say. Yeah. So I think that given the strategic implications of AI, both in a commercial context and with military applications, I think you're just going to see the basis of a lot of cooperation there. And it would further reinforce the commercial drive that seems to be behind a lot of Mr. Trump's policy proposals.
Right. Meanwhile, if we just focus on the Defense Pact, well, Trump has called it the largest defense sales agreement in history. Dmitry, but how do you read this in the context of the current regional security architecture, particularly with Iran, the war in Gaza, and also the US troop presence in the Middle East?
Yeah, absolutely. So something I've written about before, and it's no way an endorsement, is that there seems to be tension within the White House between Steve Witkoff and Trump himself. And that rift we're seeing really manifest between the relationship between Trump and Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, who has been an Iran hawk for decades now. Now, if you were to look at the situation in Iran from an Israeli perspective, right, from a purely strategic one, again, this is not an endorsement of any kind, and this is something I actually wrote about a few months ago, that I believe that more likely than not, you will see an attempt at regime change between now and 2029 to the extent that you have three factors that make it ripe for regime change from likely the perspective of the Israelis, which is you have social instability in Iran. Most of the people there living in Iran do not like the current power structure in place. You have a lot of Iran's military assets that were decimated when we saw tensions escalate last year. And third one, although this one now is a little bit more precarious, is you saw hegemonic support. Now, Mr.
Right.
Trump, and was a surprise to me, has not actually been as hawkish on Iran as I was expecting. He seems to be more inclined to make a deal. To the extent that this falls in line with his more isolationist policy of not wanting to involve the U.S. in foreign wars, that makes sense. I think in terms of the broader security architecture, having that military package with Saudi Arabia is a way to sweeten the deal in order to have them join the Abraham Accords. Because Saudi Arabia stewards, let's not forget, Islam's two most holiest cities, Mecca and Medina.
Yes.
Having them recognize Israel formally would serve as a huge legitimizing force in the Middle East and could carry tremendous strategic value to Israel. But the Saudis know that, so they're not going to give it up easily.
Right.
So I think to that extent, if we do see Iran continue to try to enrich its uranium program past a certain threshold, at some point something's got to give, because a permanent stalemate is just simply not possible. At some point, something has to tip one way or another.
Well, we'll be keeping a close eye on all the developments. Dimitri, as always, thanks so much for making time for us and joining us on NDTV.
Thank you for having me. Great to be on.
Meanwhile, a week after Operation Sindoor, the fragile truce between India and Pakistan appears to be holding. Cross-border explosions have ceased, drone sightings have stopped, and blackouts, they continued in some areas as a precaution, but signs of normalcy are beginning to return. Markets in certain border towns are slowly reopening and daily life is cautiously resuming. But while tensions remain just beneath the surface, the relative calm has brought some much-needed relief to residents along the border. In fact, Shiv has been tracking the latest for us on Ground Zero. He joins us live this morning with a quick update. Shiv, we're given to understand that Jammu and Kashmir is limping back to normalcy. We also know there's a cabinet meeting on the security situation that the Prime Minister is expected to chair. But take us through the latest from Ground Zero this morning.
Good morning, Parmeshwar, and to all of our viewers. The 3 days without any major incident, we need to use our words carefully because there have been some drone sightings in some places in the last 3 days. But last night and yesterday was overall largely peaceful. There was nothing. The only major thing that happened here in Jammu and Kashmir, of course, was that big army encounter in the Shopian forest where 3 local terrorists were killed. That had nothing to do with the Pahalgam attack. Those terrorists are still out there more than 3 weeks later. But like you rightly said, I think the situation here in J&K is sort of crawling back to, once again, I hesitate to use the word normal because nothing is really normal in Srinagar. Living in tense times and unpredictable times is the normal here in Jammu and Kashmir. I can also tell you that as far as the border is concerned, the line of control is concerned, things continue to be, things have de-escalated, obviously. The mood is much calmer. There's no shelling, there's no firing, so there's that. But things are on a hair trigger. There's no getting around that. After what the Prime Minister said a day before yesterday in his speech to the nation, and after visiting the Adampur base yesterday morning, he's made it very, very clear that India is in a full reactive mode as far as Pakistan is concerned. The glare is on Pakistan, the pressure is on Pakistan, the prerogative is on Pakistan to ensure that it does not trigger India into a devastating reaction. So as normal as things seem right now in Jammu and Kashmir, to the extent that people are used to at least getting back to the rhythm of life, there will always be unpredictability around the corner thanks to our very volatile and precarious neighbor, considering that it still hasn't really demonstrated any crackdown on terror groups, etc. This is going to be an ongoing situation. This is not a closed chapter as far as Operation Sindoor is concerned. And like you said, that Cabinet Committee on Security meeting, as well as many other top-level meetings I'm hearing are going to be happening this week, will be attending to all of those issues.
Shiv, as always, thank you so much for joining us with the lowdown this morning. With that, let's turn our attention now to the United States. Well, Donald Trump's administration is cutting another $450 million in grants to Harvard University a day after the Ivy League school pushed back against government allegations that it's a hotbed of liberalism and anti-Semitism. In fact, in a letter to Harvard on Tuesday, a federal anti-Semitism task force said Harvard will lose grants from 8 federal agencies in addition to $2.2 billion that was previously frozen by the Trump administration. The letter categorically said that Harvard has become a breeding ground for virtue signaling and discrimination and faces a steep uphill battle to reclaim its legacy as a place of academic excellence. By the way, hours after the latest cuts, Harvard filed a legal challenge to several sanctions imposed by the Trump administration in recent weeks. But for further clarity on this, we have an alumni of the Harvard University joining us live on NDTV. Richard Painter is with us. He's also a law professor at the University of Minnesota Law School. Always a pleasure to talk to you, sir. Trump's team has argued that there's a dark problem on Harvard's campus, and by prioritizing appeasement over accountability, institutional leaders have actually forfeited the school's claim to taxpayer support. As an alumni, take us through what's going on beyond the political rhetoric and also the reactions to this latest cut.
Well, what we see is that the Trump administration targets specific universities that it doesn't like, law firms it doesn't like, law firms that represented political opponents of the president, and so forth. And this is part of that broader pattern. There are definitely issues we need to deal with in higher education in the United States, including anti-Semitism, racism, a lot of issues we need to deal with in all of our universities. There's nothing unique about Harvard in that respect. Harvard is a very wealthy university, and we have many universities that don't have as much money. Certainly Congress would be justified in treating the wealthiest universities differently from a tax perspective than those that don't have as much. But to target one particular university or a handful of universities for political reasons is not appropriate. And I don't think that the Trump administration is going to win these cases. A lot of contracts were entered into by Harvard University that are enforceable contracts, and the government can't back out. If the government doesn't want to award new contracts, that's a different issue, and the Trump administration might be able to get away with that. But once again, this is an approach which is highly selective, saying, well, we're going to target Harvard and not the University of Chicago or other well-known universities, and it appears to be political retribution. At some point, I think Congress is going to want to tell the president, we need to deal with the issues in higher education. The cost of higher education in the United States is astronomical. And we have a lot of underfunded universities throughout the United States as well. But this type of political stunt is not going to help anybody.
In fact, Harvard has filed a legal challenge to several sanctions imposed by Trump's team in recent weeks. But thank you so much, Mr. Painter, as always, for making time for us and joining us on NDTV. In other news, moving closer to its India entry, EV giant Tesla is reportedly planning to set up an assembly unit in Maharashtra's Satara. A Business Standard report said that the Elon Musk-led company will be setting up a completely knocked down a CKD plant, which would help in keeping its component import duty costs in check. Now, CKDs are actually assembly plants where all the different finished components of a vehicle are shipped from different locations and facilitates local assembly capabilities for a company. Now, this development comes a couple of months after it was reported that Andhra Pradesh government has been making all the effort to attract investments from the global EV maker by providing incentives, and its Economic Development Board also prepared a pitch for the same. But it seems the efforts to that effect have fallen apart. And with that, let's turn our attention now to Canada, where Prime Minister Mark Carney unveiled his new cabinet, promoting Indo-Canadian Anita Anand to the position of the country's foreign minister. Mark Carney announced a two-tier ministry with members of the cabinet and secretaries of state, equivalent of ministers of state. So there are 28 cabinet ministers and 10 secretaries of state. Also promoted was another Indo-Canadian, Maninder Sidhu, who was re-elected in the April 28 federal election from Brampton East and was made Canada's new Minister of International Trade. The two Indo-Canadian secretaries of state are Ruby Sahota, who will be charged with combating crime, and Randeep Sarai, who will handle the portfolio of international development. Basically, as relations with the United States will be the prominent agenda item for the government, Mark Carney seems to have opted for continuity in that regard. But for further clarity, let's go across to my colleague Maha Siddiqui, who joins us live from Vancouver at the moment. Maha, take us through the latest details. Canada's Prime Minister has unveiled a major cabinet shake-up, and Anita Anand is now the Foreign Minister.
Yes, that's right. It's a slim cabinet with 28 senior ministers and 10 junior ministers, which are the secretaries of state. But important elevation there for Anita Anand, though Anita Anand has even in the past held very important portfolios like the Defense Ministry, the Science and Innovation Ministry, as well as the Transport Ministry. But this time around, the Foreign Ministry comes in as a very critical ministry for Canada at a time when there are geopolitical shifts, when its relationship with the United States has changed so dramatically that these portfolios become even more critical as Canada goes out and reaches out to other allies and partners. The top ministries, as you have pointed out, Mark Carney has chosen continuity. We are seeing Dominique LeBlanc and Francois-Philippe Champagne, along with Anita Anand, as the top ministers who will be engaging largely in the talks with the US as well. The Canadian government is looking at a new and renewed agreement with the US as far as economic and security is concerned. And therefore, Mark Carney has chosen those people who have been dealing with the US and with trade issues in the past as well. But clearly talking about Anita Anand, a person of Indian origin, she is a person who jumped into politics, fought her elections first time in 2019, this time from the riding of Oakville. Earlier on, when the Trudeau government was in trouble, there were murmurs that she might not contest elections again. But the stunning comeback of the Liberal Party meant that Anita Anand fought elections again, won, and is now the Foreign Minister of Canada. The other important Indian origin person you mentioned there with regards to the Ministry of International Trade, again, a critical one, considering at a time when Canada is looking at Indo-Pacific, and in that context, India could also become a country that Canada will have to realign and engage differently from what it has done in the past. Parmeshwar?
Maha, as always, thank you so much for joining us with the latest. In fact, as Maha is reporting, Prime Minister Mark Carney has unveiled a major cabinet shake-up and named Anita Anand as Canada's Foreign Minister. We have a reaction from Ms. Anand. Listen in.
I, Indira Anita Anand, do solemnly and sincerely promise and swear that I will truly and faithfully and to the best of my skill and knowledge execute the powers and trusts reposed in me as Minister of Foreign Affairs.
Welcome back. Volodymyr Zelensky has doubled down on his promise to wait in Turkey on Thursday for face-to-face talks with Vladimir Putin, calling it a test of Russia's willingness to pursue peace. In fact, speaking to journalists in Kyiv, Zelensky had said he planned to wait for Putin alongside the Turkish president, Mr. Erdogan, adding that he would travel to Istanbul if Putin opted to hold the meeting there. Over the weekend, though, Putin proposed direct talks with Ukraine in Istanbul while dismissing demands by Kyiv and its allies to agree to an immediate ceasefire or face further sanctions. But Washington, meanwhile, has been pressing Ukraine to attend the talks in Turkey despite European calls for Russia to first agree to a month-long ceasefire. Just listen in to US President Donald Trump's remarks.
I've also been working relentlessly to end the terrible bloodshed between Russia and Ukraine, and very importantly, talks are being held in Turkey later this week, probably on Thursday, and they could produce some pretty good results. Our people are going to be going there. Marco's going to be going there. Others are going to be going, and we'll see if we can get it done.
In other news, as Israel continues to enforce a blockade on 2 million Palestinians, hunger in Gaza could have a lasting impact on an entire generation. These are not my words. This is what the World Health Organization has warned. The IDF's military campaign against Hamas has left 500,000 people there facing starvation, with the situation particularly acute among children. The World Health Organization warning comes as Donald Trump arrives in Saudi Arabia for his 4-day tour of the Middle East and following the release of American-Israeli hostage Eden Alexander on Monday, but stern warning coming in from the WHO regarding the permanent impact of hunger and the hunger crisis on Gazans. And let's switch tracks now. Billionaire reality television star and entrepreneur Kim Kardashian told a Paris court that she thought she was going to be raped and killed in a 2016 incident in which she says she was robbed of more than $9 million in jewelry as 10 suspects faced trial for allegedly orchestrating the heist. Kim Kardashian's appearance in a Paris court is actually her first time facing the alleged robbers since she says she was held at gunpoint, bound with zip ties and gagged as men dressed as police officers robbed her of expensive jewelry during Paris Fashion Week back in 2016. And with that, let's get you a quick update from the French Riviera. Cannes 2025 kicked off in style with Quentin Tarantino opening the prestigious film festival with a surprise appearance, setting the tone for a star-studded celebration of cinema. So day one actually saw a dazzling red carpet appearance by Bella Hadid, as well as other international celebrities, making it a glamorous start of the festivities. Representing India, Payal Kapadia attended the festival as a jury member, while veteran Hollywood actor Robert De Niro was honored with the Palme d'Or. Thank you so much for investing your time and watching this edition of The World 24/7. As always, we'll keep tracking the latest for you. Do stay tuned.